Hello and welcome to this video. Frank Zappa, in his autobiography, made a point about art which I found very interesting. And recently on another video, I delved into this area and it's elicited quite a few comments. And some of the comments, I found myself, trying to explain the concept more. So I thought it would be best to create a video where I explain the concept more. Now, the quote I've got is the title of this video. And this video is called, "The Most Important Thing in Art is the Frame." Frank Zappa then goes on to say, the frame tells you where the art stops and where the real world begins. Now, Frank Zappa, aesthetically, I would class as a modernist, at least in the music. In the lyrical content of his music, I would say he was more of a postmodernist, but he was a modernist materialist. He famously said that music was an air sculpture, reducing music right down to its material aspects. The elephant in the room in Frank Zappa's statement is the fact that he doesn't talk about the aesthetics. The aesthetics is the judgment that the creator uses to identify this thing in the real world as art. So let's just go through this concept and try and explain it. And then I want to talk about the aesthetic aspects of it. And most importantly, I want to explain why this is really, really important for creative people. And I find it a very useful philosophical process to have gone through because it's motivating. And I'm going to explain that at the end of this video. Okay, so let's start. We live in a world and we experience that world. We have evolved to experience that world in a number of different ways. Through our sight, through our hearing, to our touch, through our smell, and also things like our awareness of space, our ability to jump off things and land in the right place. We sense the world around us through a whole network of different inputs coming in, and then us judging those inputs and then acting upon them. Now, aesthetics is really to do with our process of discerning quality out in the universe. So, for example, if we were to want to eat an apple, we go to the apple bowl of apples and we look at them, we will pick them up and we will judge them on their aesthetic appearance. We're looking for the quality, we don't want to eat the bad apple, so human beings are always trying to identify the bad apple. This starts aesthetically. We know the apple's bad, but we make a judgment about that apple being bad on its appearance. If it's got a few wormholes in it, and if it's looking a bit battered, a bit brown here and there, we think this is probably a bad apple. Now you may say, yeah, but Andy, what you're seeing, that's nothing to do with aesthetics. That's just you seeing something visual and interpreting it in a way which is based upon what it looks like. You could say that this brown and grub-eaten apple is actually quite beautiful. And you could. But how would you make that point? If you're a human being and you want to communicate to somebody else, or even to yourself, that in a way, this apple's quite beautiful. And that bowl of apples contains your fresh, ripe apples that aren't quite ripe enough, and maybe a few brown, old apples. And maybe that's a metaphor for us as human beings, but maybe it's a metaphor for life and death and the natural processes that surround us all. And that is another aspect which might not be useful in discerning which one's nice to taste, but it might say something more about the world that you live in. This is what art does. It takes the aesthetics of something and then it extracts quality from it. It extracts sort of ethical and moral aspects that are out in the world. Now, if you wanted to make the point that this mouldy apple was beautiful, you would have to present it in a certain way. And that's what the artist does. The art is not in the apple. The art is in the way that the artist sees the apple and interprets the apple. Now, the fundamental thing defining that is the fact that the first thing you're going to do is see that apple and you are going to fence it off from reality. You are going to say, see this, I want to draw your attention to this thing. And within the framework that you use to draw attention, the art's about to happen. And this is why it's really important for artists to understand it, is that every decision after that is about creating the framework. Now, behind me, you could see a picture on the wall, and it's a picture of Elvis Presley. It's right there in the background, right? So Elvis Presley is a person, but somebody has decided to paint Elvis Presley, and they're presenting Elvis in a certain way. Now, the reason why we would look at that is because I've placed it on the wall. And our perception is that we can look at a wall. This is the fundamental thing of how art works. Is you look at the wall, you can see the wall, and you go, the wall's real is the real world. But when I move to that part of the wall, I'm going to discern it. And this is an act of identifying quality. You go, right, but this here, this asks for my attention, and it asks for me to see if there's quality there. Now we have the relationship between the artists and the viewer, and those are both really important. And the artist can develop their creative skills, but so can the viewer. Now, the reason I mention this picture in the background is that when I first moved into this space, it was completely empty. And I stuck something else on the wall, and I'm about to do that now. So if you could just hold your horses there, I will do that right now. Yes, I'm actually getting up. Oh. Can't get it off the wall. There we go. So here now, I am putting this on the floor here. And that changes our perception of that picture. It's not in the right place. But the framework, the frame is still working. If I look down at it, I will still discern that picture from the floor. When I first came into the studio, I picked up this symbol. Right, I brought this symbol with me. And I had nowhere to put the symbol, so I hooked it up against the wall, like that. Right? There it is on the wall. Just checking that you can see it. Because I want you to become aware of something else in a minute we'll touch on. So I just wanted to check that it was in shot. Someone came round to the studio and they looked up, they went, oh, that's nice. And they walked over to it and they went, oh my God, it's a symbol. Because the act of doing it had changed their perception. If it was hanging on my drum kit, it would be a symbol. And you would see that and think that's a sound making device. And when you hit the sound, a sound emanates out of it. If we were to use that symbol in a recording, the recording would have to be switched on and off. And inside the framework, the time framework of that recording, our symbol would exist. And then we would listen to that as being a piece of art. The people who design the symbol, there's a framework of the symbol itself. And the framework is striking it. And the person who designed the symbol, they use their aesthetic ability to hit it and go, that sounds nice. So you can see this framework is shifting all around. So if we examine that hanging on the wall and the fact that that has now changed and it has made our attention focused on it, we start to judge what it means. Now, one of the things that this person, when they came in, they went, oh, it's a symbol. And they went, it looks really nice there, though, doesn't it? Because, of course, that symbol is a very nice thing. So if you wanted to show how beautiful a symbol is, you could hang it on a wall. That is what we mean by the frame. Okay? Now, I want to show you something else. If I pick this symbol up, and I slide it against the wall. Let's try it here. Okay, so the process of me putting it on the wall, I noticed something else had happened with it. It was making a weird sound, and a sound that we wouldn't associate with a cymbal. It was singing these long notes, not the psh that we expect. And so I might go, I like that sound, I want to use that sound. I have made a choice in hearing something that I find aesthetically pleasing. Now, on the video I did last week that came out last Sunday, which was really looking at the principles and elements of music, I walked around this factory that where we live here. Well, I don't actually live here, but you know what I mean. And I found something that sounded really nice, and I made a composition out of it. Now, that was a composition because I recorded it. Recording is very important. When you record a visual thing in a painting, that happens over the time that you spend taking the framework. And everything that you do that is the art is within the framework, right? If a painter's painted away, they get really carried away and they go off the painting and onto the wall, and they go, oh my God, I made a mistake, and they get back onto the painting. When they present that painting, that bit is not actually part of the artwork. If they wanted to include that, they would have to expand the nature of the frame. So why is this important? It sounds like I'm being really pedantic and talking about really simple things and trying to make really simple things complex. Well, the reason why it is important is because it tells us the nature of what being creative is. Being creative is going out into the world and putting a frame around stuff. Now, this is important because it boils down what the aesthetic process is. Okay? Now, from now on, I want to talk about primarily music. Everything that you hear in the world has no aesthetic value whatsoever until you go, I like that sound, or that sound has a meaning. Right? So there are two aspects within our judgment of a sound. One could be the fact that we find it attractive, we find it could be really ugly sounding, but it has an emotional effect. So let's park that over here. And that's the emotional, that's the visceral, that is the thing that creates some sort of pleasure or anti-pleasure, all right? Now, the term I use for that is the hedonist aspect, hedonism, the hedonist aspect of something, the thing that's just about pure enjoyment and nothing else, right? Having your back scratched is a hedonist act, as is, getting blasted out of your face on drink or drugs is a hedonist act. And we tend to see hedonism as meaning something like that, but it doesn't. Hedonism is pleasure without all the other aspects attached to it. Now, say if you were making a composition and the composition was about war, and then you went going around your house looking for sounds, that changes it because now there's a meaning there, right? There's a meaning that you're trying to nail your expression onto, right? And as soon as you try and nail it in terms of meaning, and like an outside structure comes into the art or comes into the music, and then that becomes something that where you have to say, right, no, it needs to be like this. It's not just about pure pleasure. It's about what you're trying to say or what the art's trying to say. And this sort of, I call it the armature. In art, the armature is this thing that holds up your sculpture, and it supports the sculpture when you're creating it. And there is an armature of meaning when you create art, if you're trying to say something. So you could, for example, use spoken word. I once did a track which was very dark, and I decided to use this. It all dropped down in this sort of free improvised, really dark King Crimson-esque track. And it all boiled down, and I thought, I want a voice to come in, and I want a German voice to come in. I want that sound of it. I wanted this sort of like this sort of almost like chant that pointed to sort of the sort of Teutonic, Beowulf type of thing, right? So I went on the internet and I grabbed some German. Now, I don't speak German, so that guy could have been saying anything. And if you're German, listen to it, you may think, why is this guy talking about his shopping list in the middle of this? Now, I'm aware of that, but I was going just for the pure aesthetics in terms of my viewpoint of that spoken word. But if you were making a song about warfare and you want some spoken word, you may go and specifically choose the sound because of its actual meaning. So the meaning, and from that comes the structure, from that becomes the thing, your intention. And that, I think, points to the grid. You are trying to make things, that's the control, that's the bit where you're trying to make it perfect. That is where the artist comes in and they start to go, right, I need to make this perfect. I need to have control over that bit. Now, we now go towards a very important concept in the creation of art. If you were to listen to most music, most art, photography, books, and you were to ask yourself, what is this truly about? Well, when the artist starts to do something, as I said, there's an aspect to it, which is their intention, and that creates this sort of perfectionism here. But there's another aspect that they're not in control of. Now, this is the great subject-object debate. It's the thing that a lot of postmodernists try to address, especially people like Theodor Adorno, to some extent the constructionists, and the post-constructionists. All these people really start to say the art's not just about the viewer, the art's about the art's not just about the intention of the artist. The viewer brings something to the art. And this really is personified in the idea that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So this happens a lot on this channel. I will make a video and there's something happens in there. I did a video the other day where I tried to make myself immortal. It was a very esoteric, philosophical Saturday video. And at the end of it, I realised as I was talking that really what I was talking about was the idea of love, and that everything is fundamentally love. And I think, all art is fundamentally love. But I didn't expect to arrive at that position. But at the time when I said this, right at the end of the video, I was wearing a Beatles t-shirt, and people that thought this was wonderful, that maybe I had planned this, but I hadn't planned it. Now, when I became aware of it, I was quite happy to accept that as an artistic outcome. But even if I wasn't happy, I got no choice about it. So there's an aspect of the art which you're in control of, and there's an aspect of the art that you're not in control of. And what the postmodernists have done is they've completely focused on that aspect. There's no author, it's all about, it's all a sort of mishmash of stuff that exists in the world. And they also saw it as being a mishmash of how other people have seen the world. Now, this, of course, is useful to some extent, but I feel for artists, it moves you towards a place which is, it's a trap. So, in 1917, Marcel Duchamp famously took a urinal and he upended it. He signed it without his name, Armut, and he put it in an exhibition. Or maybe he didn't put it in an exhibition. Or maybe he put another urinal into an exhibition. Or we don't really know. And anybody who studied the history of that realizes that we can never pin that event down. Now, the reason why Marcel Duchamp did this is that he wanted to tie the intelligentsia up in a philosophical knot, which he did. And from that day on, all high art and fine art keeps asking the same question: what is art? They're obsessed with the fact that anything you drop into the framework becomes art, which is a very important aesthetic point to make, except when you do it over and over again. And I think postmodernism is a trap that puts you there. The wonderful thing about Marcel Duchamp is he did it in 1917 so that other artists could go and make art elsewhere. And this is the one thing that's never said about that piece of art, is that from 1917 onwards, we had the development of jazz and blues, recorded music, we have film, then we had like the internet, we've got like computer games, TikTok, all these other things have come in, which fine art does not put into the framework of their framework of what is high art, right? That's exactly what Marcel Duchamp, why did he want to do it? So people could really do it. Now, what's this consideration of fine art, or this consideration of high art, right? It's about creating something that has embedded worth. It's like it has an extra worth. We start to get a hierarchy of worth in the arts. Postmodernism also did a thing where it would take low art, novelty art, and go, there's actually something of worth in this as well. And I think that's a very useful thing. But the fact is that we have these high art, it's existing in this high art world, it's refined, and there's other people doing other things, right? And the judgment that we've inherited from the modernist idea of what art is and the postmodernist idea of art has sort of atrophied, and it affects the way artists create. So what Marcel Duchamp was trying to destroy was the idea of salon art. This is where artists would paint a painting, it was about their expression, it was about their personal view of the world, and you judged it on how well technically they were able to put their idea across. And these ideas were quite determined by the form. So you might be a landscape painter or a portrait painter, you might paint animals, and in the hierarchy of worth it would have been animals at the lowest and then landscape and portraiture at the top. Right, so this is a really restrictive structure in which the modernist of our idea of the worth of art existed within. This is a product of Enlightenment thinking. If you go to most sort of folk art forms and you look at where the worth is there, what they are doing is they are revealing something that's already beautiful. So we think of the Taoist out in China that wants an ornament on their table. So they will go down to the river and they will find a nice stone that's been washed over by the water, or they might go up onto the roof of their house and they will extract a slate and they will go, I find that the prettiest slate, and then they will present it exactly the thing I'm talking about. And that's where I got this idea, was from Taoism. If you're an Indian classical musician and you are trying to play in a raga form and you're playing within a certain set scale and you're trying to play those notes in a certain order, it's not your virtuosity that you're interested in. You are trying to reveal a beauty that exists in the universe that God has put there, right? So this idea of revelation goes all the way through, and in Western music it goes all the way through up until about the point where Bach emerges. And Bach's music is different to Beethoven. We could sense it because Bach is trying to reveal the beauty of God, but Beethoven is making a sort of almost like romantic statement about his personal position in the world. And so with Beethoven, he is the genius. He is the guy that is expressing himself. That idea forces itself on art. So when an artist comes to sit down and make art now, they have these two competing ideas, and they are really competing. Now, remember, if we go back to looking at what is actually going on when you go and stick a symbol on the wall or decide to, pat your hands on the radiator and record that as your drum part, is that hedonist aspect of pure pleasure that you're enjoying, and then there's the grid. there's the meaning, there's your intention. And we could see this part is all about revealing what already exists in the world, and this one is about making a statement. Now, anybody who thinks one of those is the best is wrong. What art does is it actually, when it's really good, is it puts those two things together, and those two things act harmoniously. And in doing that, what we are doing is we are taking our experience and we are putting our own viewpoint on our experience, but accepting the reality of our experience at the same time. We are joining hedonism and perfectionism together. Okay, that is a really good way of seeing how art works. But if you go to the one that we've inherited from modernism and postmodernism, and all the ideas that go right back to the Greeks, what you will find is that idea of what is beautiful, this one here, that becomes a cliche. So people they're chasing what they have been told is beautiful. And the thing they're trying to say, in the same token, they're trying to say perhaps what other people are trying to say. Now, the reason why this sort of postmodernist, modernist view doesn't work, and it's very much why I believe that Marxism doesn't work, is because we have individuals. And individuals bring themselves to it. And the individual brings to it a sort of narcissistic view of themselves, and also a self-loathing view of themselves. Now, any artist watching this, the light bulb and the alarm bells, those two things together, will go off. The artist believes that there's something so special about themselves that they should, and notice the word should, be presenting their view of the world for someone else to see. That straight away is quite an arrogant thing to do, right? Now, the balance to that is to think to yourself, no, I'm not. All I'm doing is trying to extract my idea of beauty and present it to the world, but the beauty's out there. That gets you off the hook. But why is your view important? Then you might answer, because I want to see if other people have my viewpoint. And if other people have a similar viewpoint, and we get a consensus on what is beautiful or what is good, then we can start to create a sort of moral framework for how we live, right? That is a very useful way of seeing it. But people don't get that far. They exist in a world where they're going, I need to be in a situation where I can express myself. I'm that should happen. I am so worthy that I should be in a position where that happens. And the world comes along and goes, yes, but you're not really good enough, are you? We need some sort of system. We can't have everybody just presenting art. And that system naturally exists because everyone's creating art. Everyone's saying the same thing. And it's the person who says something different. It's the individual. It's the somebody who goes against the narrative that moves culture forward. But that doesn't mean that the person who just wants to go out on the weekend and, paint landscape paintings and not reinvent the wheel, that doesn't decry that. But we start to see that there is this division, and there's this other idea of worth that we bring into this. But even more poisonous of that, and I think the two things are related, and they're sort of a balance between the creative person and this at war, is that once they believe that they are so worthy and important that they should have a right to express themselves and people should watch what they do, but they also have self-loathing. And so they believe that the thing they're doing is not very good. And so they go into this creative endeavor thinking that fundamentally they're not very good. So what they do is then they start to check on it. And they take all these ideas I've just described, and they go, right, so is what I'm doing any good? Well, the sounds and everything, do they conform to what other people think is good? Right, and the meaning of it, does that conform to what other people think is good? So this idea becomes fundamentally the reason why the art exists. So this is the lesson of this video, creative people. 99% of art is about one thing, and it's about the artist trying to look good. That is what you're hearing. That is what you are seeing. That is what you are perceiving. That's what it is. There's listeners out there and viewers that are quite happy to partake in that and go, yes, that conforms to what this general idea of what good is. All right? And there's nothing wrong with that, except as soon as you come along and say to yourself, I'm not very good, and I must try and conform to the ideas that other people have said is good so that I can appear like I know what I'm doing, the creative process goes away. Now, why does the creative process go away when you start to create in that way? The reason is because it comes back to the frame. You are creating a framework around the world, right? You are drawing attention to this. Now, that may need technical skill, but the technical skill required is entirely based upon your own personal, individual opinion about what is good. That is all that you can offer. And your judgment will be the judgment that you've got. You cannot enhance your judgment. You are stuck with what you think is good. Okay? Now, so how do you get out of that? You have to realize that the process, when it comes down to it, is fundamental, and that is that you go around and you make judgments about what you think is good. And the practice of doing that will remind you that it's your judgment, right? It's your individual judgment, and that does count. As I've said before, do other people have this judgment? Now, there's going to be two responses to this. Some people will go, yeah, I think that sounds really great. But other people might be shocked. And this is the shock of the new. This is what is truly meant by avant-garde, right? And artists in the modernist to postmodernist period were trying to question this. You know, when people say, oh, you know, somebody sticks a bunch of bricks in an art studio and they call that art, that's a load of rubbish. That's the shock of the new. That person is trying to make the point that I'm discussing here. So a really good way of counteracting that is to practice. Now, the thing about practice is really important. If you learn an instrument, you have to practice. Some people love practicing. Some people hate practicing. I've always loved practicing, so I'm very aware of why I love practicing. And the reason I love practicing is because when I'm practicing, I never feel like I'm practicing. What I'm doing is exploring how nice things sound, right? So I will sit down and watch TV, and my guitar is sat next to me. It's right there, right? Now, where's my guitar? I'll go and get my guitar now. See if we can... So I now have this acoustic guitar. Isn't it beautiful? Now, I find this aesthetically pleasing. I really do. Especially this one. This is not mine. This belongs to Rob Growcut. And I find this guitar aesthetically pleasing. And I want to hold it. And that's part of the thing that I enjoy about instruments. I love the tactileness of them. And so I'm happier holding this now than I was before. It's designed around your body, and it's curvy, and I can put my hand in there, and that puts it in a nice position. And when I grab it, my hands gravitate to the strings. It's just here now. If I try and hold it and steady it, my hands are on the strings. Now, when I first picked up a guitar many years ago, I knew that you could play chords, so I made a chord up, and it was a chord that was easy for me to play, and it was that chord there. I didn't know the name of it, and I probably tried all sorts of different chords, but at some point, I came across this chord, and I liked that. So I remembered it. It's actually an A major 7 chord. Oh, I don't like that sound. Oh, I'll miss that string out. I'll just do these strings then. And I literally started to play the guitar, not because I wanted to play the guitar and I felt like there was this big mountain of practice that I needed to climb. It's because I used to like to pick up this. And that's how I started. And then you get bored. Well, what else could you play? Well, what if I do this here? Oh, that's nice as well. And I don't have to move my fingers then, do I? That's nice, I like that. But that note there, don't like that note. I wonder if I can get... That note sounds like it would go with it. Oh, that's nice. I'm using my judgment. Right, so what I did then was taking those elements in that one chord that I loved, and I tried to make something that I thought sounded nice. Now, I have spent a lifetime doing this, and in doing this over and over again, in a searching and searching, I think I've learnt ways of playing the guitar in a sort of rhythmical way so it sounds okay. I can fret the chords on the guitar okay, so that sounds quite good. I've got a sort of inbuilt organizational thing now, which I didn't used to have. All this stuff has come out of practicing, the practice of taking something that you love on an instrument and exploring it and making it sound nice. Now, a composer called Bela Bartok, very advanced, one of the greatest composers of the 20th century and one of my favorite composers. He created a series of piano pieces called Microcosmos. And the thing about this, it's not Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. It's nothing like that. These are modern classical pieces and they sound wonderful. But anybody can play the very first piece, right? And if you sit and practice that and focus on making it sound nice, that piece is done. And if you play that well, you are playing that first piece as well as any piano virtuoso could have played it. There's no distinction. Then you can move on to the next piece, which is slightly harder. And the idea in Microcosmos that everyone forgets is the aesthetic aspect that goes with the creation of music. And I believe everybody is able to do this, but they have to practice it. And in that, the practice of doing, and the most important thing that helps you to do this, the practice of doing it, is the idea in music of the performance. And the performance is the framework, right? So I picked up that guitar. That now is a piece of music. You could mix that off if you wanted. You could release it. You could create artwork and put it out on the internet. If somebody enjoyed it, then they enjoyed it. If somebody else didn't enjoy it, and it could be rubbish. It could be that, nobody in the world liked what I just did. But that's not my business. I cannot worry about that. All I can think of is the framework. And every time I pick an instrument up, the framework becomes apparent. Oh. Now, I have used my aesthetic judgment to tune this guitar into a position where it's completely unplayable by anybody that would normally want to play the guitar. But doesn't it sound beautiful? Now, a really strange thing happened then in the middle of that, and I'm so glad it did, because it really shows something. I started in safety. Now, when I hit that note, you think, well, Andy, play the guitar. This is totally now, I've got no, if I play a major scale on this, there's no logic to it whatsoever. And so when I hit that note, it was totally random, but it sounded quite nice. But when I was picking those notes out, do not think that I knew what I was doing. I absolutely didn't. And when I moved down to this here, and we hit that nasty thing, and to my ears, I was like, oh, this sounds like... So my aesthetic sense now is going, oh, I don't like this. So rather than go, I hate this, I've gone wrong, I try and push my perception of what's going on like a listener and go, what is actually happening here? How do I make sense of this ugly bit? And I knew, and this is out of practice, that if I'm here in A, that is what's going to make sense. Now, how do I know that? You studied scales and you know, well, no, it's totally about being in this process, completely about exploring it and reacting. Reaction is so important to creating art. You do something and something happens and you go, whoa. Now, and you react, you could train yourself to react well. This is the essence of art. This is why I say that improvisation should really be called creation, because it's all about creating. You know, I mean, it's like, is that art? That's just nonsense? But you could present that. It's in contrast to, isn't it? And you could feel that. So when that thing happened in the middle, we go, oh, I don't like this, and that don't like this. But it does not matter, because I knew I could exist in that world. And then when I returned to the world from here, but when I return back to here, there's this ebb and flow now between ugliness, between ugliness and beauty. There's an ebb and flow going on in the music. And that's telling a story. And that is fundamentally what it does. So your ability to create stuff that sounds beautiful, but your ability to create stuff that's not beautiful and put that into the context, I believe, is the most important thing about art. To tell that story, to tell the story that things can be good and then they go bad, but we can make them good, is the fundamental of every single story, of every single painting, and of every single melody. It's absolutely the conjunction between this hedonism, the pure beauty, and this structure, the perfectionism, and the ebb and flow between those two things. And when an artist does that, what they do is they're exploring the sublime. Now, I am not trying to say that all art's great and you could just express yourself, but your expression and view of the world will be unique to you. And this is really important. Some people have an idea of what they want to say, and that requires a whole lot of technique or method, because technique's just method to get aesthetic effects. It will need a whole lot of very complex method that will need a whole ton of practice to be able to express. But other things are very simple to express. And artists, when they first start, should start with simplicity and understand that simplicity is at the same artistic level as the complexity. And the whole gamut of that is there. And as you start to do it and do it more and more, you will refine a sense. And that sense that I've met so many different artists, and that refined sense that they have, which makes them skilled, is absolutely different. And the reason why art is often communal, I know painting's not and writing is it, but filmmaking is, music making is, all these other art forms are, is because there is a communitarian aspect to art when you open up the idea to all these different individual viewpoints and try and create some harmony or dissonance between those. This is what jazz does. Everyone is expressing themselves within a framework, and within that framework, they can be in or out. But the story of how they go out and then back in is so valuable. And so this idea, fundamentally, for those out there, is that you are allowed to just go out into the world, and if you're a musician, find things that sound nice. And that applies to your windowsill, or maybe a leather chair, or it might apply to your instrument. This is really important. And when you focus on that, or if you don't focus on it and you realize that you go, right, I'm just trying to make myself look good now, aren't I? I'm just trying to make myself, stop that. Where's the beauty? That is fundamentally where I needed to get to on this video. And I think I've got there, yeah. Always ask yourself, where is the beauty? Thank you for watching this video. I hope it was some help to you. If you like this video, you can like it. If you want to see some more, you can subscribe. I've got a Patreon where I go deeper into these ideas, and I have a PayPal tip jar, and the links are all down below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next video.